Welcome to the Fabric of America, the podcast that celebrates small businesses and the remarkable stories that weave our communities together. We're your hosts, Melissa Otto
and Matt Banover.
Matt is a fashion designer passionate about storytelling through style.
And Melissa is a seamstress on a mission to make sewing cool again and inspire the next generation. We sit down with small business owners, artisans, and dreamers to uncover the stories behind their brand, what inspires them, challenges them, and keeps them creating.
Because we believe that behind every idea, every design, every stitch, there's a story worth sharing. So grab a drink from your favorite local shop and join us as we weave together conversations about passion, perseverance, and the power of small business.
I think having Rachel on was just such an there was a lot more emotional investment in having Rachel on because what her book was, it meant so much to both of us. And then there's also this huge personal connection. Like, we met her, we found her, we've talked to her. Like, this community has grown because of her.
Yeah.
There was almost this obligation to.
Yeah. Oh, I even felt like a catharsis from the whole thing. Was just like almost like the full circle, right? Because you and I had started talking about this podcast. I don't even know if we had gotten an episode out when we met her. And we talked to her about it, and she just immediately was like, I'm game.
Mm-hmm.
What are we gonna do? Like,
yeah.
And then you had already read the book. I then read the book. And I think I remember like texting you being like, Matt, this is insane. Matt, oh my God. Matt, this is my whole life. Like, this is my personality now, is this whole book.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, making it in America, just like, and same thing, just like when we met Rachel and when she talked about sewing and trade work, and just, there's so many levels, there's so many layers to it. But then reading the story of American roots and the struggle and I was so emotionally invested as the reader. Reading is not my strongest suit, but I find that when I'm very calculated in the books I choose to read. I know you're an avid reader. I choose my books very carefully because if it doesn't hold me, I'm out.
Well,
and I know a book is great, at least from my perspective, when I can't stop reading it. Like, that is just a legitimate cue for me and for my mental space when I'm in the process of reading a book. And hers was one I couldn't put down. And not only that, and we talk about it in the episode, it was like, I'm dog-earing pages. I am just so like enraptured in the facts and the information and the story. There were so many layers to it that I was just like, oh my gosh. And it felt like, not just because of my background in sewing, just because of being a person in America, that it was so connected to me as the reader. And I think that's what's so brilliant about the way she writes and the way she tells the story.
I don't know why, when she was talking about Walmart, like destroying communities, I literally was like welling up.
Really? That was for me when we met her, when she was talking about sewing during COVID. I was literally, it took all of me to like hold my shit together.
I remember you saying that. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was just that moment, like in COVID, because I remember feeling that. I remember being like, I can only do one thing right now, and that is to run that machine and like make some masks and like be of service and be of use to something. Like, and it just took me back for that appreciation of like the old kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then having someone else just say the words out loud that were in my mind. Done. I was done. Put a fork in me. Yeah. That just,
Yeah. When I was going through the book before this conversation, I was like, oh yeah, I want to go through my notes because I wrote, you dog ear, but I write all over the book. And I was reminded of so many times, to your point about like, just this bit of information is so important. I kept putting like newsletter, because I was like, this is an important point. More people should know. I was like, I need to talk about this.
Get the word out.
Like, Instagram reel. It was just like, oh, all this information. I was just like, people do not know this information. And like, it needs to get out there.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and it's clothing. It's like, it's not some in concept, like
Not anymore. Not with us on the case.
really.
Us yammering on all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's it's like it's not like we're talking about neuroscience where
Right.
you don't know about this. We're talking about clothing. Like
Everybody wears clothes.
Yes,
Everybody
exactly.
buys their stuff. Like
right. It impacts everybody's daily life. So this conversation is so beautiful. It's very emotional. It's a lot of information, but in such a disarming way, just a human connection. And thank you. Just enjoy our conversation with Rachel Slade.
and go buy her book.
Go buy her book. How has the last year been for Rachel Slade since the hardcover came out? And tell us a little bit about what the book is.
I actually started researching the book in 2020. So this is a long time coming, but of course it goes back much further than that because my whole life I have been addicted to reading. Maybe that's why I'm a writer. But one of the things that I really feasted on was labels. And so let me just tell you a little story. It's in the book, but let me tell you a little story. So when I was little, my grandmother came back from like Spain and she brought me this doll. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I was really, really young. And this is what a nerd brat I was. So she hands me this doll, and it's a Spanish doll, with a Spanish outfit. And I flipped this doll over, and on the bottom of it, on the stand, it must have said like made in Japan at that point, because it wouldn't have been China. And I was like, I don't understand. You bought this in Spain, but it's a Japanese made doll. This doesn't make any sense. I'm confused. And my mother is like pushing me out of the room, right? But like, that's where it started. I was always reading labels and, for my whole life when I was little, everything was made in America. I mean, we talked about it as a point of pride, but it didn't take any work to buy American clothing because everything was made in America. It just was. I know that's hard to imagine. It must be really hard for people who aren't as like aged as I am to imagine like you didn't have to work to find this stuff.
Right.
It was all over the place. It was everywhere. It was the only thing you could buy was made in America, truly, unless you bought like French fashion or Italian fashion.
Right.
And
so it wasn't a novelty.
No, it wasn't. It was just the thing.
Nope.
Yeah.
That's,
You didn't know any better because there was nothing else to know about.
Right. So the distinguishing feature was whether or not it was union made.
Yep.
And so there was the union label that went into union made clothes, but other than that, everything was just American, and just that's how we lived. That's what life was like. And everything changed in the 90s, and I saw this happening because again, like I'm a label fiend, right? Like I'm the person who like turns the thing inside out and I'm looking for that label. And like, oh, it's on the inside seam back here. It's all, they really sometimes bury it. Sometimes it's really hard to find labels. And it was in the 90s. You'd go to the Gap. You remember the Gap? No, you guys are so young.
Oh,
so
no,
cute.
no, I love the Gap.
Okay. So you go to the Gap and, there would be stacks of these pretty stinky clothes. They're stinky because God knows, where that fabric has been processed, what rivers have been destroyed, but also the shipping containers, like all the things that had to happen in order to get that horrible thing, into
the store.
Into the store. And so, there's stacks of these things. But what's amazing is you could actually like go through a pile of t-shirts, say, or sweatshirts, and the country of origin was different for every single one. It would be like, maybe 5 made here, but then 5 made there. And it just became this like international experience to shop at the Gap,
right.
Looking for basics that we invented, like we invented the t-shirt, we invented the hoodie.
Yep.
Yeah.
God bless the hoodie, right?
God bless the hoodie.
We invented the flannel shirt, I believe. Don't come at me. So anyway, I saw this happening, and even though this wasn't my thing, obviously, when I was young. I saw it happening and I was disturbed by it. I was concerned about it. And it took me this long to actually, have the chops to be able to write a whole book about it. Have a publisher who's interested in actually like this is a big book.
Yeah.
And but also, it's a moment because this moment aside, the discussion tariffs and everything, in 2020, when I started actually researching this in earnest, everybody was suddenly talking about onshoring because of pandemic.
Yeah.
And I had already written a book about shipping, right? Into the Raging Sea, which is about American shipping. And through researching that, I realized like how vulnerable we are to shipping, which is actually it's a very analog industry still in a lot of ways. And obviously it's very vulnerable. We're talking about floating cargo ships on oceans. And so I actually covered a tragedy. And what was really interesting also was just talking about how vulnerable things were. The billionaires and the tech bros, the thing that they talk about, the thing that scares them is the collapse of international shipping. Because they know, A, how vulnerable it is to cyber attack or just regular old attack. But they also know that modern life depends on it.
Yeah. It's,
Well, where do we start now?
yeah.
So that's just a little orientation.
Yeah.
So
Give us the quick synopsis of what making it in America is.
there she is.
Amazing book. Just give us the quick rundown.
Yeah.
Listener that may not have read it, and then we can dive in and talk for the next 17 hours about this. All the
Okay.
things that go into it.
We'll get
I might
started.
need a nap at some point. But okay,
Right.
so this
We'll
is
have
good.
an intermission.
Some breaks. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So in order to write a book that I thought would really appeal to people, I needed to find characters, right? Like we all love a good story.
Yeah.
And what I didn't want were characters who were independently wealthy or supported by private equity, or I don't know, were, like management consultant for a really long time and decided to sink, like 0.2% of their riches on some kind of dilettante enterprise. I didn't want that. And you guys know what I'm talking about. So it had taken me a really long time to find like real people trying to bring American manufacturing back in like a real way. And so in 2020, I was fortunate enough to meet Ben and Whitney Waxman. They are based in Westbrook, Maine, which is just outside of Portland, Maine. There are two Portlands. Portland, Maine, the good one. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
That was the original.
Yeah.
And in 2015, Ben was a union organizer. He worked for the AFL-CIO. And Whitney was a bar manager. I mean, you can't get more like, we're working people than that. And Ben really had this vision that Whitney totally glommed onto, that the way to change American culture and politics and lift up working Americans was for him to show it could really be done. And he thought about making all kinds of stuff. They considered even building ships or boats. But ultimately they landed on apparel because, there's little investment. The initial investment is low, but we all know that, then it requires a lot of work on the back end.
Deceiving, right.
But the initial investment was low, and he knew that he had a market for custom like hoodies and t-shirts, branded stuff, because he had really good union contacts, and union people support union people, and he was a union shop. They were a union shop.
Yeah.
So, I meet these two people, husband wife team, and I meet their employees. And by the way, this is a story for a lot of these places in 2020. They shut down, retooled, and started making PPE, right? Protective gear. So that's where I began. I was like, who are these people? And what are they facing? What does it take?
Yeah.
What does it take? I wanted to know from like a really kind of like intimate, personal level. What does it take to start a factory in the 21st century in America, like a union factory, in Maine, all of it, all these things working against you.
Yeah. Oh my God, there's so many things. So I think that it's important. It's a fun story to tell that I went down to Madison, Guilford area. I was just driving around, killing some time. And because I am very much, I always want to look for a local shop, a local this, a local that. What can I bop into? And there's a bookstore down there called RJ Julia. And I was like, okay, well, I only have about 10,000 books, so I should probably get some more. And I walked into this shop and I'm just like looking around and I'm loving everything. And um, I remember this so distinctly. It was so insane. I walk into this one room and almost like it was the universe kind of making this happen. It was a whole wall of books, and you know how that's usually spine out, so you read,
Mhm.
and then they have a couple that were facing, and dead center was your book.
Wow.
It didn't like what caught my attention was it's a hoodie. And so I immediately was like, oh, it's clothing. Yes, there we've got the image of it. And I looked at it and I
Thank
was
you, Melissa.
making it in America.
At the ready.
And then I just like picked it
That's
up.
amazing. I love that.
Didn't hear, it wasn't on my radar that this book was coming out. I just grabbed it, picked it up. I'm like reading it. I'm like, wait,
Right.
what?
It's literally your entire ethos in a book cover.
That's amazing.
It could
and
not be
all-
more cosmically.
And I love that this isn't
primed.
an Amazon story, right?
No.
Right.
This is the kind of story that I love because it's about you being a human being
Yes.
seeking out other people, right? You went
Yeah.
to a bookstore, you weren't poking around on your phone or whatever.
Yeah.
You walk in, you're surrounded by human beings, and humans made this choice to, it worked in my favor and our favor, but I mean, like, it's humans communicating to each other. You know what I mean? To show you, like, here's something you might want to read, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. Like that is truly how the layers of how this story tells itself how important shopping local and meeting the
Mhm.
creators and connecting with people, and how physical retail, how understanding, going into a store, how all this plays a part. If I'd
Yeah.
gone to Barnes and Nobles, maybe that wouldn't have been there. Maybe
Whoa. Let's ease up on Barnes and Noble. Let's be good
Yeah.
to them too, because they're
Well, it's
trying.
like you never
But I mean,
never
like-
know what any other store is kind of pushing. I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's
okay,
true.
cool. It's I know that RJ Julia really promotes like the local
Yes.
authors and people that they know. And so I go in there, grab the book, I pick up the book, I devour the book. As I'm reading it, I'm taking pictures of like what I'm reading and I'm posting on Instagram. And all of a sudden, your story was liked by Rachel Slade. And I was like, whoa, stop. And then
She's
I'm
a
like
human
reading-
on the internet. Oh
I'm
my
like
God.
reading,
yeah,
I'm reading,
right?
I'm reading. And then I say something, and it's like, Rachel Slade like replied to your story. And I was like, stop, this is insane. And then I'm like reading, and then you and I start a dialogue.
Yeah.
And we start communicating, and I'm reading, I'm posting. And then in February, I think of last year, I get contacted by American Woolen, who's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
hey, we want to partner up with you, and we really want you to be an exclusive partner. So American Woolen is a textile mill in Stafford Springs, Connecticut. They reached out to me and said, we want you to carry it. So I meet with Jacob. We start talking. I'm like, hey, there's this book out right now called, and Rachel Slade wrote it, and like, you have to get it. And he was like, oh, that's crazy. Then I make a reel about everything that you were saying about NAFTA in the 90s, and I posted it. And then American Roots start following me.
Oh, this is
From
great.
Northwest Alpine started following me.
Yeah.
All these people. And it just exploded, all because I walked into RJ Julia. And that's not even the best part, which is months later, RJ Julia, where I first picked up the book, had an event, a night with Rachel Slade, and Melissa and I go to that, and we finally meet. All of that, my business transformed just from that. And I think,
really,
and I swear,
really,
we're gonna let Melissa talk at one point during the interview.
I'm just waiting. I have a litany of stuff to talk about, but
Yes,
it's
exactly.
fine. It's cool.
And I think that one thing that really stuck out to me, and it's what I talk about the most when I bring up your book, which is I think 2 or 3 times a day.
wow.
Probably my favorite part is the first 100 pages. How did we get here? I love Ben and Whitney's story. It was very touching. I have American Roots hoodie now, and I just emailed them about carrying their product.
Right.
But to me, the most impactful part was the how did we get here? Because that's what people don't get. That's what people don't understand. How we did this to ourselves.
Thank you.
We did this to ourselves. We all on the media, you hear we blame China, we blame this, being so unfairly, blah, blah, blah. No, we did this to ourselves. We signed these agreements. We did after we did the WTO, we did all this. It didn't used to be like this. And people who are younger than us, they can't even imagine a world of paying $110 for a hoodie. What a union worker is, what clothing made by unions is like, it's foreign to them. And I know that because last night I was at an event talking about this with a girl who was 25 years old. And she was like, I can't even process the words you're saying that, this would take months and it's going to cost what? And the fabric is where, like, all of this, it's a foreign world.
Yes, right.
We did it to ourselves. And I think that the fact that you took the time to meet people where they are, which is a place of not knowing, was so brilliant. Of just, I need to know that here's all the facts. Here's the story. Here's how we got here. Here's what it used to be. And here's what it is now. I thought that was such a important way. And I mean, my book is just written like all through.
Oh, I love that.
And all these underlines. And I know that meant a lot to Melissa also.
Yeah, I think I have like 100 dog-eared pages of just like coming back to that, coming back to that, coming back to that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was, I couldn't stop reading it. And I am a slower reader, we'll put it that way. But like Matt said, devoured the book. I think it's part of also, like, aside from setting the basis for the story, it's important for the reader, and in this case, while we're talking, the listener, to know that backstory, because if we don't know how we got here, we don't know how we're going to get anywhere close to getting back to there. And I don't know if there's a universe in which we go to the complete 180 back to how it used to be. I don't know that that's a viable thing, and we can get into that and why that is a little later. But I think if we don't know how we got here, we can't arguably fix it.
Thank you.
And
I completely agree.
I would love if you wouldn't mind just giving a quick overview of like NAFTA. I know there was a part in the book you talked about like explaining what dumping is. All those different things that have kind of impacted like how we are processing product at this point.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I like to talk about Walmart. Like, let's just start with Walmart, because the underwear wars is a chapter of my book. And I feel like that's just the best story. That just epitomizes what happened in the US. So in the 80s, greed was good. like we suddenly discovered greed in a way we had never known it before. And I was a teenager in the 80s and greed is good too. I remember saying to my parents, like, what would you think if I became a millionaire? I remember saying that to them. I remember we worshiped stockbrokers and it was crazy. And when I started at college, everybody was going to go to Wall Street. Trust me, when we got out in 91 during the recession, nobody was talking about that again. But yeah, greed was good.
Yeah.
And part of what was fueling that was the idea that, like, oh, look at all these other inefficiencies in the economy, right? And all the big companies were kind of off leash. They just went off leash, and we lowered banking regulations, and we lowered rules about monopolies and that sort of thing. And so Walmart went bonkers, and a lot of other companies just went nuts with mergers, acquisitions, and just like buying up real estate or space. And the idea was getting too big to fail. Like that was the original, impetus there. And so I have this chapter about underwear wars. Can we talk about underwear for a second?
Yes, absolutely.
So there were two companies in the United States that made underwear, like mass produced underwear. We're talking about white t-shirts and tighty whities and that sort of thing. And it was Hanes and Fruit of the Loom. And Fruit of the Loom was based in Kentucky. And in a small town in Kentucky, Campbellsville, Kentucky, actually, and they had 20,000 workers making like millions of pairs of underwear a year. And these were good jobs, mostly women sitting at sewing machines, and they could go and do their work and send their kids to college and, support their families and pay for their homes and everything else. These were good jobs. I want to be clear. These are good jobs.
Yep.
And
sewing is a great job, everyone.
I mean,
for
It's a great
applause.
job.
they were paid well, is my point,
Yeah.
because they were considered skilled workers. They were valuable. They were highly trained. In order to be an industrial sewer like that, not the work that you guys do, but on an industrial scale, to be that efficient, to be that fast, takes time. And so they were highly valued until they weren't. But what happened was the pressure didn't come from Hanes or Fruit of the Loom. It came from big buyers, specifically Walmart. So Walmart was busy taking over the United States, right? So suddenly, like, Walmarts were popping up everywhere. And there were actually a lot of communities that tried to keep Walmarts out. But it was tough. You needed to have laws on the books that could keep a Walmart out, because people saw what was happening. If a Walmart came in, all the local stores went out of business, like like faster than you could, turn your head. And, so that's why going to RJ Julia is like a major statement, right? Like going to a small bookstore is saying, no, I reject this model. But the model has been going on for, 40 some years. So anyway, so Walmart was making a huge push into middle America. And their big sell to Americans was, we're going to sell you goods cheaper than you can find in your local department stores. So do you remember there were department stores? Like every community had a department store, right? And it was kind of the way you associated with your people was like, oh, you remember Strawbridge and Clothier in Philadelphia? No, of course you don't. You're from Connecticut. But like for me, I was in Philadelphia. We had Wanamaker's and we had Strawbridge and Clothier. And like, that's how that's where we shopped, right?
Yep.
There was this whole like local economy. But anyway, so Walmart said, our hook is cheap goods. And they went to the manufacturers, Hanes and Fruit of the Loom, and they said, make your shit cheaper. In fact, we're going to tell you how cheap you have to make it in order to get our business. And because there were two companies competing for basically the American market, which was owned by Walmart, they practically put each other out of business. They were working faster and harder to produce things cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because the retailer was dictating the price. So instead of the manufacturer determining the price based on labor and cost of everything else, this time the retailer, the major retailer, the massive retailer, was determining the price. And they couldn't compete. And so they were very much behind NAFTA. And NAFTA was, of course, our first free trade agreement, which said there will be no tariffs and no taxes if you do your manufacturing in Mexico or Canada, right?
Yep.
Before there were taxes, before if you offshore, that's what we call offshore. If you manufactured in Mexico, it was super duper 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 cheap because people demand a lot less money down there for many reasons that we can get into, but it was super duper duper cheap. But then you would have to pay the tariff to bring that thing back in.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, in an instant, that blockade is gone.
Right.
And
Because
so
that tax was almost like a buffer, right? Keeping people from overly sending things out of the US, basically.
because it was the obvious choice.
Right.
I mean, Americans cost more.
Right.
And we can talk about why Americans cost more, but because it's all good, actually.
Right.
And we should. And we can talk about that. But
Right.
but
So now the rails
short-
come off.
Yeah, the rails come off. And apparel went first. Because again, lowest bar. Not what you guys do, but like you
No,
just
I
need a
get it.
sewing machine.
Yep.
But then everything went with it. And then, of course, China opened up as well. And suddenly, we are flooded with cheap goods.
Yep.
And we're exporting all of our know-how, right?
Right.
So everything that Americans developed over the past 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, like how to make high-end textiles, how to make sophisticated garments, how to make washing machines and sewing machines, and how to make robotics. And by the way, how to make like chips and iPhones, like all of that ingenuity, all of that brilliance, all of that know-how, we just sent it out.
Yep. We sold it out.
Yeah.
We sold it out so we could
We
get
did.
cheap stuff.
For short-term profit.
Yep.
I read, Sam Walton's autobiography.
No, I did not. Tell me what he
yeah.
says.
Well, it's like heartbreaking. Like I'm like borderline on the verge of tears with everything you were talking about with Walmart because it's just heartbreaking that they have just become this villain because his autobiography it's called Made in America. And
ironic.
Yeah.
So ironic.
And the reason he started Walmart was because he wanted to be a community all under one roof. The reason why Walmart has such diverse products is because he loved traveling the country and was like, oh, this guy sells tires and this guy sells shirts and this guy sells fishing rods. What if I just put it all under one roof? And here we are. And then it just became this monopoly. And then it became terrible to everything that you were saying, that they just started bringing the product down. And he, in the book, he died a long time ago, but he does talk about that process of taking something made in America, sending it to China and being like, replicate this dirt cheap and send it back.
Yeah.
And that started to become a big thing. Now what's really terrifying, and this is why I was getting like so upset about it, was because Walmart is now doing this thing where they are really trying to make everything in America.
Yeah.
But they're doing that same tactic, going after American-made companies that are making stuff in America, and they're saying, here's the price. If you want to sell in Walmart, this is the price you have to make at. And I know several factories that have told them to go screw themselves. No.
I mean, thank goodness.
Yeah, like I don't care if you say that with Walmart, you can do, volume at this level.
So many millions of business.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars in business.
I want to own the process. And I want to, if this factory is going to make some clothing on their terms, they want it to be their terms, not Walmart coming in and saying, you got to sell it shirts starting at $90 or something like that when it's below cost.
Right.
Like that's insanity.
Well, and isn't that also part of the whole like China doing the dumping, was that not, like, refresh my memory, but was that not where they were producing all this stuff at under
Yeah.
cost, basically, and like subsidizing it? The government was subsidizing it, knowing full well that, like, we're just going to hook you all in and that's it. Now you're dependent on us.
Yeah, I mean, so that's what's so heartbreaking too, is that we have to remember that, America has been industrialized for 200 years, but China wasn't. The industrialization that's happened in China has happened over the past few decades. And they have a lot of people to take care of, you know. It's a huge landmass and a lot of people. And they were also communists, so they could make a policy decision and just go for it, right?
Yeah.
And so when they decided that they were going to industrialize, and when they were invited to join the WTO and have most favored nation status, they just went for it. And their first order of business was figuring out how to offer pricing so low that nobody could resist, right? Everybody's got a price, right?
Yep.
And that meant a real concerted effort, right? Like there was tremendous coordination. So that meant owning their shipping. So, it starts, for me, it always starts with shipping. So, shipbuilding is heavily subsidized. Port building is, a state enterprise. Remember, we once built ports and highways. You remember that?
Right.
They got some great ideas over there.
I know.
Yeah.
It's all it's our plan. It was all our plan. Like when America was China, we were doing that, and then China became America, so everything flipped. And so yes, right. Everything was heavily subsidized. Housing was subsidized. Don't forget they have universal health care. Wouldn't that be nice? So how did they do it? I mean, they did it by, relocating people, creating workers' housing, providing universal health care, providing training and that sort of thing. But also, they didn't have the environmental laws that we did, and they didn't have the labor laws that we did. So those laws are on our books, and they make working in America safe, but they make producing in America more expensive, relatively speaking. And so you combine all that, and then they can offer, I mean, I know you're talking to Lexi Silverstein, right? They can offer like a $5 dress.
Yep.
And that thing is horrific.
Yes,
when
it is.
when I see, you said my book made you emotional. I have to say, like, when I see these $5 dresses and I look at the fabrics, first of all, that makes me cry because I just see exploitation everywhere. And then I see how the things are cut and how they're constructed and how they fit, like everything about it. I just think this is a tragic, tragic, tragic item, from beginning to end.
It's wrong on every level. Every level. And none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
Other than the profit monger. Like that's the only thing of it that you're like, all right, I get why that guy likes it, but I mean, and we get the cheap good, but was it Mitch that said, like, cheap also costs? Like, who's paying the price for this?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's so many costs in that thing that we're not yet paying, but we will, right? We frickin' will. We're going to be paying that price. And so that's why, I'm all for, obviously, what you're doing, which is very custom work. We need people like you. I have so much admiration for Melissa. Someday I'm going to sit down with you and just watch you work.
You're welcome anytime.
And you too, Matt. But we need people like you, and we also need apparel manufacturing in the United States again for all sorts of reasons that we can talk about.
Yeah, and what you said was very powerful about, when you see a dress for $5, it makes you very emotional and upset. What is super important to remember is that when a kid who's 16 sees that, there's no registering.
Right.
They
because
think jackpot.
they have no frame of reference, and they're not to blame for not understanding why that's bad. You know, there's us jumping up and screaming, saying it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. But if they're getting just an entire feed of why these hauls and why they're good, and they have never seen a sewing machine, they have never seen a
Factory.
a factory that needs repairs. So you need a guy who knows how to repair a machine. You know, if they don't know any of that, how could they? You know, how could they even taught you? They in these massive corporations have all the money that they saved on moving from natural fibers to synthetic fibers put into marketing, telling you why their synthetic fibers are so much better. They're stretchy, they're whatever. You can put I saw some guy take a pair of suit jacket like out of his pocket. He like pulled it out and he's like, look, it's like super wrinkly. And I'm just
super
like,
compact. Yeah.
oh my God. Like, why do you even
And
want
look, you
that?
can light it on fire.
Exactly. Please, like, that thing is so
You can use it as
dangerous.
a torch.
Exactly.
Like, don't,
Oh my
go there like
God.
a bug swatter. That thing will
Right.
go up in flames. But that's so important, is just like the gap of knowledge has now so extreme.
There's such a disconnect. It's so unfortunate. We're in such an age of information, but we're not in an age of attention. That's where like that balance has shifted, where we really do have the ability to get almost all information at our fingertips at any given moment. But do we want it, or do we see it? So it's always
100%.
like, where can we just, all of us, get the message out, reach and reach and reach. And Rachel, in your book, I had actually one of my dog-eared pages was the quote that was from, I believe it was Strickland Wheelock from Stanley Wolf. And he said, the people who had all those high skills and knew how to repair machines, they got old and retired, and the younger generation didn't like doing the machinery jobs the older folks had no problem with. And like,
I had that written down also.
Oh,
there
that's
you
so
go.
funny. Yeah, he
So-
was quite amazing.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, so what's interesting is, we're all scared of AI. I'm scared of AI. I mean, I use AI every day. Obviously, you do too. But, we're all scared about how it's going to impact the job market. And the amazing thing about apparel manufacturing is it is still so hands-centric, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's really labor intensive. And part of the reason that it hasn't been automated, of course, is because we're using a lot of cheap labor abroad. And so manufacturing can be done very cheaply using humans.
Yep.
But if we were to bring it back, obviously we'd still need a lot of handwork. But the challenges are really interesting, right? From an automation and AI standpoint. And we could actually solve a lot of the climate and environmental problems if we brought this industry back to America and took our incredible ingenuity and applied it to this problem, which is, billions of pounds of, textiles and apparel just in landfill every year. We could solve that problem if we decided that was something that we wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because we're so smart.
Yeah.
I mean, this is another thing that I just don't get, right? Like, people keep saying to me, and I'm sure they say this to you, they're like, why are you talking about this? This is too hard to do.
Yeah.
Too hard.
I mean, it seems it's a daunting problem. But if this isn't the problem of our lifetime, like, what are you going to do? Just sit back and let the world be on fire? Like,
Okay, wait. What's too hard? Like, landing a guy on the moon in 1969 when you had like 8-bit computers and you were doing calculations by hand?
Yeah.
Okay,
Plus,
that's legit hard.
Yeah.
Like,
the Wright
I don't
brothers.
even believe we landed on the moon. No, I'm kidding. But like, that's major hard. You know what else is hard? Well, I'm sure you guys saw Oppenheimer, but like building nuclear weapons, I don't condone them, but building atomic bombs without anybody knowing, like, how many people were involved? 50,000 people involved in manufacturing this thing, and not one person knew what they were building. Yeah. That's hard. I would say that's hard.
Yeah, I think another big part of this is also there's a few points that I don't think get brought up enough, which is what is the end goal? That's hard.
Right.
Well,
Right.
what's hard?
Yeah.
What's hard is the battle of overconsumption.
Mm.
Also, we're not saying that American manufacturing, apparel manufacturing, should replace that of Shein or Temu. We're saying that that's wrong, and where it's made is wrong. How they're making it is wrong. It's a whole litany of issues.
Right.
We're not saying that there should be shipping containers leaving ports every 5 minutes filled to the brim with clothing made in New Jersey or whatever. That's not the point. It's like we're at this problem. Like there's enough clothing on this planet for the next 7 or 8 generations.
Yeah.
Overconsumption is a problem that
Right.
needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
So it's the question of, is it really hard, or is it just we don't want to change, right?
Exactly.
Is it the internal work that needs to be done to shift mindset?
Mm.
It's like,
and how do you face a giant corporation who's constantly shoving marketing and ad dollars down your throat to get you to buy, to get you to feel less than? And it's not just clothing, it could be overconsumption of anything. But
Right.
that's the whole point. There's a system designed to tap into something in our psyche to get us to buy and next day ship and all the things that we talk about. And so we have to like get hip to the tricks, and the more we talk about it, the more that message just like trickles out there little by little. And like, I have so much faith that one day we will see like this revolution. And I really do feel like we are right at the beginning. And I feel it in my soul. Like young people will take up the mantle, and they're not stupid. Again, information.
Yeah, they're not.
They know what's happening, and their peers are going to share it, and it's going to go viral, and it's going to be this and that. And like someday we will see this.
Well, I agree with you, but I do want to say that, I did live in a world that was different, where it wasn't about volume buying because you couldn't, because stuff was really expensive. So I've experienced
Yes.
that world. And I used to say to my daughter, I still say it, maybe it's like, if you want something, wait a week, wait 2 weeks, depending on the price. Like if you still want it after 2 weeks, then we can talk about it, right? So it's just like hitting pause, not the instant gratification. And oftentimes you forget about that desire. But in a world, in this different world that I used to live in, which maybe we can bring back, we had different values. We truly, truly did. And volume consumption wasn't part of it. It wasn't available to us. We didn't have what we now call big box stores. Like I said, we had local department stores. And there were just like a few things that you might really want because it was the fad of that year. Like you had to have a pair of Puma sneakers. One, I'm saying one.
Right.
And so you thought about it for a while because it was expensive.
Right.
And your parents would be like, well, do you really need it?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, look how worn out my sneakers, so yeah.
Right. This justification of these purchases and everything. Yep.
And we were middle class, it's not like we were poor. But but when things cost, then you have to think about it. You have a discussion about it. But also there was this assumption that the things would last. And so if you did finally convince your parents that you absolutely had to have whatever that thing was, they knew it wasn't going in the trash tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think it's hard to get the horse back in the barn. And that's why I have been pro-tariff, because if we can raise the price of imported goods to the point where they actually cost what they really do, like if they're somewhat similar to American pricing because, we've taxed them, then I think it will compel people to slow down a little bit. Because Melissa, I really hear you. Is that desirable?
Yeah.
Is that what we want? and I know you're very sensitive to like the environmental concerns. Obviously, so am I. I mean, there's some crazy statistics out there, right? Like we've produced something like enough clothing to clothe everybody for the next 6 years. Is that right? Have you heard that one?
Generations.
Generation. Okay.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Generations. Yeah.
Yikes.
It's
that's
terrifying.
Billions of people.
Yeah.
Like that's an insane statistic. And to your point, Rachel, about this world, this magical world we call the past, what actually we actually did
It
this.
was real one day
Like
at
this,
one time.
this isn't some
It was.
fantasy that we're hoping for a future.
Right.
This was how it was.
Man.
Dana Thomas, who wrote Fashionopolis, I don't know if you've read it, but
That was a
yeah.
good
this
one. Yeah.
amazing chapter where she talks about the size of your closet. Like when you used to go in,
Yes.
old houses have just tiny closets.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, I don't know if she mentioned this, but this guy, if you take a drive through America, there's one building type that you see over and over and over and over and over again. They're in cities, they're in countries, they're in rural roads, they're everywhere. And it's not a church. It's the storage. Have you seen this? You
No.
you guys live in Connecticut, but you
Yep.
must see storage everywhere.
Yeah.
Where like
Yeah.
store your stuff, right?
Correct.
There are all these
Yeah.
different companies that'll store your stuff. And we have a place up in Maine, and when we go up to Maine, it's like there's a beautiful field, and then somebody like plows it under and they build one of these storage units so that these people can make extra money, like storing people's stuff. My point is, storage is a growth industry in the United States. It's massive.
Yeah.
It's massive. It's because we've got so much stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
We've
Right?
got too
Like-
much stuff.
Yeah. And so
Well-
we're actually paying people to store our stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
For it just to exist somewhere.
Yeah. Because there's so much stuff that now there's storage everywhere. It is the most ubiquitous building type other than like a house.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
insane. That's insane.
Now that I've said that, you'll see it. You'll be like,
Yeah.
oh,
I mean, they're
that's awesome.
everywhere. Our town actually, I think, was fighting a private guy who wanted to come in and put storage in, and they were like, we don't want this.
That's great for your town, but it says that there's a lot of demand.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well-
because people are buying stuff, inheriting stuff, but mostly
Right.
buying stuff. And it's too much stuff.
Yep.
And then we
Right,
move.
exactly. No, and that's
Right.
that's like to your point about it's hard. I'm just like this isn't we're looking at the conversation at a warped view. It's not what's hard, it's what needs to change. Overconsumption needs to change. Bringing back apparel manufacturing is not hard. It's the
Right. Right.
consumerism that needs to change. That's what's hard. Bringing it back is easy. We've got the
Yeah.
people. We can train people. We can do all that. It's will people buy it because they're not going to have the options of buy one get four free and all the what. It's just like, oh hey, you just buy the one thing you need. I've been
Right.
telling so many people that I bought a polo last week, just one shirt. And it's the one shirt I've bought for months, and I'm so excited
Wow.
about this one thing. I saw that your post about the Imogene and Willie t-shirt.
Yeah.
So excited! I've got Imogene and Willie pants on right now.
Oh, that's cool.
But something that we started talking about at the beginning of this dialogue, and something that I think it's a really nice way to kind of wrap out with, and also tying back in your book, why apparel? Like,
Yeah.
why is that the vessel that you want to use to have this conversation?
Absolutely.
I might have my answer, but why for you? Somebody who really loves like shipping and all this, like why apparel?
So my background is actually in architecture. I was trained as an architect. And ADA was passed, I think, in 1992 or 1993. That's the American Disabilities Act. And the premise was if you could make buildings usable and accessible for the most compromised individuals, the most challenged, physically challenged individuals, then it means that building can be used by everyone, right?
Mhm.
Like that's the idea. And so apparel, as we've been talking about, is very baseline manufacturing. The investment is pretty low. And, it's a couple sewing machines and a lot of training and space and patience, but I mean, it's not like chip manufacturing. So my idea, first of all, is just if we can figure out how to bring back apparel manufacturing, we can literally bring back anything.
Mhm.
That's my first point.
Chills.
Well, hold
Chill.
for applause.
Right? Yeah, please.
Right? So let's
Oh.
gear policy for the lowest common denominator, which
Yeah.
is apparel. And that will open up, America to any kind of production. So that's the first thing. Because it instantly begs a whole bunch of questions, which then, if we can answer those, would apply to any kind of manufacturing. Like, how do you pay these workers? Yes, they're highly skilled, but they don't have college degrees. They might not even have high school degrees. So, like, how are we protecting their wages? Do they have health care? Do they have permission? Do we give them permission to unionize so that they can, have access to good information and protect their rights and their wages and that sort of thing? Like, all these very, very basic things that I think are required to give people dignity of work, right? To get, if we can give that to apparel if we can do that in apparel manufacturing, literally anything is possible in the United States. And that's my vision. That's my dream, is that we have capacity here to do anything, and we're doing it and we're building. But the other point is, just talking about apparel and textile manufacturing, like, this actually requires a lot of machines, a lot of machinery. And as it becomes more expensive, if you bring it back, it's also going to require a lot of ingenuity and innovation, both in how textiles are developed, but also in what machines can do. So it will demand, all kinds of new ways of thinking that China is doing right now because they have the manufacturing there, right? So all these kids who right now, so our best and brightest, by the way, the rich kids, the best and brightest, the ones who are going to college right now, do you know what the main major is for these? Yeah? No? Do you know what all of them want to go into?
Tech or AI or something.
Yeah, so there's comp sci, computer science, but finance. What the hell is finance?
Yeah.
What are they financing?
Yeah.
Right? Like, finance used to be about industry, supporting industry, like figuring out how to, make things happen in the world. But finance now is about mergers and acquisitions. So it's much more about, again, like, sucking the last, drop of blood out of American industry with all these mergers, acquisitions, and offshoring and everything else. That's what my understanding of financing is. So we've got all these brilliant young people who have no even orientation toward manufacturing, which could solve a lot of America's problems, both politically, culturally, and environmentally. So that's why I'm saying, yeah, let's start with apparel manufacturing. Let's bring it back. Let's make it interesting. Let's bring in the machinists. Let's bring in the robotists. Let's bring in the AI people. If we can make apparel manufacturing work, we can make literally anything work in America.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
right?
I mean, that it very much goes to my view is very much in line with your first part, which is how you do one thing is how you do everything. I buy clothing made in America, and because every morning I have to get dressed, and when I'm constantly reminded of choice, I chose to buy this polo, chose to buy these pair of jeans, it wasn't just this frilly thing. It informs me that, okay, well, I made these choices. Then I go on and I buy coffee from a local shop. I don't do mobile order Starbucks. Then I choose what I need for my business. Like it affects every other part of my existence. And so it does that for me as a consumer. I think it absolutely has to do with what you're talking about with other industries. And when you look at it from a business perspective, I mean, if you just look at how many industries and innovations and products and developments that spawned from NASA just explore space, they took all of these little side bits and created
Right.
MRI machines or whatever. So this is how innovation works. And we
Yeah.
can get it because we are now a country that doesn't make anything. And
Right.
we have a generation who is so confused about it. And yes, this is why,
Disconnected.
where they're so disconnected because we don't get what it was like to do this and to have
Right.
Right.
innovation spawn from other innovations and do.
Mhm.
And Melissa, she put it so great. Like I think like a year ago or something, I heard her talk about how we glorified this whole management, cushy lifestyle, the person who oversees and does this, and kind of demonize the blue collar, the less than grunt work. And it was like that disconnect that just got fueled and further separated is now what we have. We just have people who want the cushy lifestyle. They want finance. How do I make money from my bed and from my phone? How do I do this? How do I make somebody else do the thing? People get into fashion now, which means they send an email to China and say, this is
Right.
what I want.
Make this,
is blah, blah,
please.
blah. Drop ship. You know, you go on YouTube,
yeah.
it's all about how to create a drop ship business. They never even see the product,
Yeah.
so now they're even so far removed, like, let alone how it's made,
Yeah.
what it even is.
Right. It's laughable.
It's
Yeah.
garbage.
Yeah, no,
They're
it's
like,
pretty
oh, I made
sad.
$1 million last month because of my side hustle.
Mm.
Yeah.
So the one more thing I wanted to add was I'm on a new tear now because I'm starting to. It's taking me a while to put all this together, right? This is huge. This is such a huge topic. I mean, I love that the three of us are talking about it. It's just so big. When you took away manufacturing, you still have Americans, you still have brilliance, you still have, colleges and universities training all these people. And so you had this like pent up energy to invent, right? To develop, to profit. But when you took away manufacturing, something had to fill that void for people to make money. And so they called it the service economy, right? They said, oh, we're switching from a manufacturing economy to a service economy. But what I am now calling it, and I hope that people start to adopt this language, is the extraction economy. What do I mean by that? It's the service economy by another name. So once we took away manufacturing and we had all this like pent up, brilliance, people started to find new instruments to extract money from us. And so that's why, and you can see the charts, about how the cost of college exploded for a number of reasons. But also the cost of healthcare exploded. A lot of this has to do with the fact that now there are many hands between you and the transaction or the service, right? And all those hands came about because people need to do stuff. People need to find the money, right?
Yep.
So they're applying all of this ingenuity in developing new ways, consulting or whatever, to insert themselves in every single frickin' transaction. And I think, the kind of apotheosis of that, right, is Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
Because he takes his wealth, his incredible wealth is based on fractions of pennies on every single transaction that happens in America, right? That's the extraction economy right there. And it's making billionaires.
And information. I think he also is like king of extrapolating information.
Yeah,
And selling it.
extracting. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so the point is he's not making anything, right? He's extracting fees in every single transaction. And so it's allowed the extraction economy has allowed great concentrations of wealth at the top while we produce less and less and less and less because producing is too expensive and too complicated. But creating a way to like just get your dollars from every transaction is easy now.
Yeah. I love when people love bragging about Amazon and the free shipping and the free returns. And I'm like, let's take a beat and talk about this word free. I was like, we're driving
No
and all
such
those
thing.
giant Amazon 18 wheelers are driving around. Who's filling those tanks? Who's like gas? Who's paying for that driver? Like nothing's free. Like stop being an idiot. Like stop like making excuses and justifying your actions. Like whatever cognitive dissonance that you have going on, like you need to call it out. And I think that God, you made this amazing point about the extraction, which is like, how do I make money without making anything? How do I just pull from something? Whereas what I do is I have these conversations all the time because people are saying, my colleagues who just say, you would make so much money if you made your product overseas.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
they're not wrong.
Care. Like, I don't know how else to phrase it. I feel like I don't care is the shortest, most concise I can give you, and yet it's still not registering.
Yeah.
I love my
You are creating wealth, though. You are actually creating something by creating wealth. I mean, the problem is this is the extraction economy is the race to the bottom.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because ultimately there will be no wealth creation.
Yes.
Once they have extracted all the money out of us, and by the way, they're figuring out even more delightful ways to extract our wealth away from us every single day. I mean, this is where brilliance goes now. But I mean, you are actually adding value to the economy, Matt and Melissa, by taking raw materials, textiles, thread, and turning it into a product. That should be like, you guys are the heroes.
Yeah. And
you guys are really the heroes because you are creating actual wealth.
Yeah. And we talk about like that, back to our conversation about, it's so hard. I'm in business. It's clearly not that hard. Like Melissa is in business.
But I think that to your point earlier, Rachel, too, people are kind of looking for that path of least resistance in some ways. And that's not everybody. It's certainly not Matt and myself. And I think that's why for some people, it doesn't translate. Like, why would you choose the harder path? Why wouldn't you choose giant profit margins? Why wouldn't you do this or that? Like, that's just not what it's about for us. Matt and I have talked, ad nauseum about like the local economy and stimulating the local economy and the dollar that stays in your community versus buying on Amazon. And like I am very fortunate. I am well aware of my like state of privilege to be able to actually purposely buy the slightly more expensive thing in order to do that. I know that I'm speaking from a chair in a certain echelon, but if I can do it, I feel like it's my responsibility to do that until we keep chipping away at this goal of bringing that awareness and having more people buy into that philosophy. And it's changing that narrative. It's changing the mindset. It's disconnecting from that hamster wheel of consume at all costs. And it's, what Matt harps on all the time, just where does it come from? How did it get here? As soon as you can't unlearn that.
Right. Yeah.
Once you know, you kind of feel like compelled to do something about it.
But I have to say that like, since I've been on this tear, and I'm sure you, and obviously you guys too, it's so rewarding, right? Like here we are, we're a community that didn't exist before last, February, right? Like we're meeting each other, we're building a community, we found like-minded people. That's amazing. And so through my trip of trying to find, American producers like you and Imogen and Willie and, $1,000, I'm wearing my Vermont flannel.
Nice.
I'm meeting people who really frickin' care about this. And it's a much more interesting conversation than how much money they made off a transaction. Like that conversation begins and ends with, I made money. But now we're talking about, this incredible community that we're starting to build. Like, well, do you know so-and-so? Do you know so-and-so? Do you know this person or that person? And like all the people who they support in their local community. And it just kind of spins out from there. And again, it's an antidote, right?
Yeah.
Like this whole
Absolutely.
Made in USA is an antidote to global, is an antidote to anonymous, is an antidote to exploitation, right? And it's an antidote to bowling alone. The kind of the lonely modern, disconnected from everybody else, feeling so alone. Like now with with the Made in USA movement, my every transaction, every business decision that I make is being guided to a certain extent by, well, what community am I supporting? And how can I connect with them?
Absolutely.
I reach out to makers, like when I buy a lip gloss or whatever, lip balm made in like Missouri, I get a handwritten note. And it's not from Jeff Bezos.
This is one of the reasons that that's one of the frameworks that I had for starting my business, which is what you wear tells a story. And do you want your story to be thanks, got it on sale at Target? Or do you want your story to be like, oh my God, it was made in like Nashville, and the cotton came from Tennessee, and that was made here, and I got this hoodie, and the owner's name is Ben, and like in this, in the book, like one thing I connected with is that he's also in recovery and I'm in recovery. He and I talked about that. He and
That's so
I
cool.
talked about that, had that conversation because Rachel, you wrote this book. Like that is how this works. That is how this works. Like people supporting each other.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it all comes down to community. What you're saying, and waking up and saying like, I want to make the right choices. I don't need to overconsume. It's just dialing it back. How do I make the right choices, meet the right people, do all of that? There's no community of people that bought the same like Amazon dress. That does not exist. It exists from people who are like, oh my gosh, I had my wedding and I went to this seamstress and she's like the coolest seamstress ever. And
she is.
It's that thing that people care about.
Yeah.
About reaching into that community. So,
and the relationships, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
absolutely.
to your exact words. It's so much more interesting.
Yes.
It's just so much more interesting.
Like you have value. Like I am more valuable as a human being saying, I have this shirt that was made in New Jersey and I know the owner and I know the people who sewed it and I love talking about it. And maybe you'll want something. And I've made this shirt for other people. And like, it makes me a more valuable person. It adds to my life. It's not
right.
It's enriching.
Yes, it's enriching. It's also energy. Like we talked about with this woman, Kristen, who handmakes people. There's energy that goes
energy transfer.
There's energy that goes into a product. Like when you come to me, when somebody comes to me, sits down, we talk, I make their wedding suit, they leave with the knowledge of everything that I am, but if you buy something, just buy now, add to, there's no energy transfer there. It's like convenient, well, like everything that I am and that I do goes into their experience. Everything that is and does goes into that experience. They carry that forward for the rest of their lives. You can't get rid of that. You can't unknow that. And I think that us doing what we're doing from our platforms, and Rachel, with your book, it's exposing supply chain and showing that like, so the supply chain is just filled with exploitation, slavery, all terrible, terrible things. Or I can go to this supply chain and it's human value, community, enriching local economy. It's all this good stuff. And yes, does bad exist? Sure. Does, the world's not perfect. Like
No.
Grow up. Like there's bad stuff everywhere. Just
That's true.
take a pause and see that. I think, you said you were pro-tariff, and I think that it's very important to just have this acknowledgement that there's so many things that are getting politicized that should
Yeah.
not be politicized.
Correct.
It
Yes.
is not a political statement.
Correct.
To
No.
say this. Melissa and I talk about it all the time. We want the tariffs to work. We
Yeah.
want, regardless of how we stand politically, it's like we want the end goal. We can all agree there is a problem.
Yep.
How the tariff is rolled out, maybe we don't agree with.
And also what happens with the tariff dollars? I mean, that's the other thing.
Yes, like we can all
every-
agree on these things, that there
Yeah.
are problems and that we do need to fix them. Like
Yeah.
we can come to agreement. And to your point, why apparel? We all wear clothing. Like every
Mhm.
human being, what side of the
Mhm.
aisle you sit on, you wear clothing. So,
Mhm.
Rachel, we have taken up so much of your time. You've got this book that is now being is re-released, the word?
Yeah, it's coming out in paperback for the first time. Very excited. So I know I think it's reversed. I'm
We see it
blurry.
normally. We see it normally.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
That
good.
is
So
so
this is
cool.
the new, and I'm also pretty excited because they did include this really cool illo.
Yes, we have that in our
Right.
copy. I love it.
Yeah. So
Love
you
it.
can see
Fascinating.
how to make an all-American hoodie from the cotton fields all the way to shipping it out. And yeah, I hope people pick it up because it's definitely, this is what we're talking about right now. It's families, it's communities, it's machinists, it's all kinds of people involved in this. So it's a complicated industry that deserves, I think, a lot more consideration.
Agreed. And I think you wrote it so well. I found it so as the not super quick reader, I just found it so well written, so easy to digest. Nothing was like coming at it from a like too much knowledge or too high level that you couldn't understand. Everything makes perfect sense and kind of creates this passion and this fire within you, within the reader. So I hope everyone will go pick it up. I would love to know though, Rachel, what's like next for you? So we're coming out in paperback. Do you have anything in the works that you can talk about? Is there, what's next? What's the passion?
Yeah, so well, I am promoting this obviously, which is why I'm so excited to be with you today. Thank you. And then I actually wrote a novel this winter that is under consideration. I will tell you more about that later. And at the moment, just, a lot of things in the work. I'm in the works. I am a freelance writer, so I'm always doing the hustle.
Love it. We know the hustler life, all the business
Yeah.
owners do.
But I have to say that there's so much renewed energy about this topic that I'm seeing lots of opportunities to do more community building now, and that has become my big love. So if you have ideas, or if your listeners have ideas for building community, connecting people, it's really an exciting moment, especially, you're right, all walks of political life at this point. I think we can all agree that this is an interesting challenge. And some of us might be up for the task.
I think it's ripe for some American innovation.
Yeah.
And I think that people are more ready than they've been in a long time.
I would agree with that.
That's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Winston Churchill said, "Never waste a good crisis." We
Oh my God! Cheers, Win.
Right.
we are in that, and
Mm.
it really just takes some American ingenuity, just doing what we do best. And to your point on the book, back to basics. What's more basic than a hoodie? What's more American than a hoodie? How do we make it? Okay, now that we've done that, what's next?
Exactly.
Just start there and work our way out. So,
Bring it.
Rachel, thank you so much. You have impacted my life so much. It was such a pleasure to meet you a year ago with Melissa and sitting down with you. It's just a dream. And Melissa and I literally have been saying for months, is it time yet? Is it time yet?
Yeah.
The time-
Poor Rachel, I'm in
Can
her
we talk-
DMs like, now?
We're like, do we have a platform worthy of Rachel? Like,
No,
should-
please. Oh my
should we
God.
have her on yet?
I mean, I have to say that, like, after I met you, both of you at RJ Julia, I actually took the train back to New York. It was a whole big thing. It was like a midnight train back to New York City. And I was just high off of meeting my people.
That's
Yeah.
how we
Right?
felt
Like-
about meeting you.
Yeah, it was the same because, I mean, I was speaking to a lot of folks who were just like, what's this about? I mean, in Cambridge, Massachusetts or whatever. And you were the first people I hadn't reported on who
Mhm.
showed up to hear about the book, who were in it. And I was
Yeah.
just like, oh, this is happening. Like, this is why I did this. This is
Yeah.
why I did this, to start making these connections. So let's figure it out. You're doing it. I mean,
Let's
you're
do
doing
it.
it.
Well,
I love
to
it.
your
Thank
point,
you
There's
so
still
much.
more to do,
Progress.
but we're ready.
Yeah. And
Thank
to your
you
point,
so
the
much.
community just grows. So thank you, Rachel Slade, making
Author of Making It in America.
Yeah.
which is out on paperback.
June 10th.
June
June
10th. Wonderful.
Pick up your copy.
Not on Amazon.
Not on Amazon. Don't you dare after all
Yeah.
this.
Exactly. Go into your local bookstore and pick it up. Thank you so much. We got our copies here. I think I commented on your Instagram. I was like, I know what everybody's getting for Christmas. So,
It's actually a really good idea.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
for
Thank
down
you
with
again,
us.
Rachel.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah,
It's
really
been so much fun.
Yes.
Thank
and
you.
thank you to the listener for tuning in to another episode of The Fabric of America.